Russians show everything they capture. Everything except this one. That says it all.
That's the first Challenger 2 lost in combat. Another British tank has been left behind forever near Kursk, on Russian territory. But the knocked-out Challenger 2s didn't end up on Red Square in Moscow, like the American Abrams and Bradleys, or the German Leopard 2A6. In this video, you'll find out why the Challenger 2 became the Ukrainian Army's most classified tank and ended up in a secret lab instead of downtown Moscow. Why does the Challenger 2 have a bunch of red buttons? And did the Russians manage to hack the British tank?
You won't see this kind of stuff in civilian life.
Great Britain transferred 14 Challenger 2s to Ukraine with the expectation that not a single one would become a Russian trophy. That's why all footage of Challenger 2 movements goes through censorship.
Don't film.
Rumor has it the Ukrainian side even committed to destroying the Challenger 2s if there was any risk of them falling into Russian hands. But that plan failed. All 14 Challenger 2s provided to Ukraine ended up in the ranks of the 82nd Air Assault Brigade. On one hand, that's the right call, because concentrating identical tanks in one unit makes training and logistics easier. Plus, it allows for better security and secrecy. But on the other hand, that's exactly where the problem started. Because the paratroopers take part in the most dangerous, high-risk missions. They're the ones cracking open defenses and executing breakthroughs.
It was morning, but the sun was already up. We were closing in on the border, and the tanks were covering us.
As you can see, the Challenger 2 does a pretty good job of that. But what about the drones that have become the scourge of this war for every piece of equipment?
There were hits, but the armor holds, even against shaped charges.
Ukrainian operators really praised the Challenger 2 for its high level of crew protection, thanks to the Dorchester composite armor. Unlike standard armor, British armor doesn't just soak up the hit. It actively breaks down the structure of the projectile. In some situations, the tanks withstood numerous hits. We have a lot of footage of hits, but only 2 tanks were destroyed completely. In the first case, a Challenger 2 hit a mine and was immobilized. The crew managed to bail out before a Russian Kornet ATGM missile finished off the tank. The second confirmed destruction of a Challenger 2 happened with the help of a Lancet-type drone with a cumulative warhead near Kursk. It hit the tank in the turret roof or even the commander's hatch, where the armor is significantly weaker. The secondary detonation left no chances. It was right near Kursk that the thing the British feared actually happened. A Challenger fell into Russian hands because the British tank was left on territory that Russia now controls. But this knocked-out Challenger 2 didn't become the hero of propaganda videos featuring captured Western gear. Why? Because the Russians sent it to their main tank lair, the Uralvagonzavod plant, located deep inside Russia. They tore the Challenger 2 into the smallest possible pieces to reveal what Great Britain hides from the whole world, even from its US allies, the secret of the Dorchester armor. Did the Russians actually uncover this secret? Before finding that out, subscribe to our channel so we can make more videos for you. So, Challenger 2 tanks were delivered to Ukraine in the basic modification with Dorchester Level 2 armor.
The armor here is good, yeah.
Let's add a few details. Dorchester is a deep modernization of Chobham armor. That's why the armor became even tougher. It's not just layers of metal that shatter the core of a sub-caliber round. It's also ceramics that stop the flame of the shaped charge jet, so it doesn't reach the crew. Does this mean the tank became lighter?
The Challenger 2 falls into the heavy tank category. Its weight is 64 tons. That's without additional armor. And with additional armor, the weight hits 78 tons.
In other words, there isn't any less metal here. It's just that British engineers introduced a fundamentally different armor concept. Not one material, but a combination of different ones. Dorchester armor wasn't just made up. It was shot at dozens of times with different types of ammo, at different angles and ranges, to understand the material's capabilities. Here is how Dorchester works. The first hit is taken by the outer steel plate. Then the ceramic blocks in the pack come into play. This is the main destroyer of projectile penetrators and shaped charge jets. And then elastic layers of rubber or polymers, and the rear backing plate absorbs spall and residual energy.
I want to thank the British for such a cool tank. You can't even compare it to the tanks I fought in before.
However, even Dorchester isn't a silver bullet against a swarm of drones.
In current conditions, we need additional armor and EW. We can't survive without it.
But if the secret of Dorchester is revealed, it negates the advantage of Western tanks over Russian ones. Because in lab conditions, the Russians can perform chemical analysis of every plate. They can test fire at intact fragments on the range to find weak zones, X-ray the turret, and then develop ammo guaranteed to defeat Western tanks.
These tanks were created primarily to stand up against Soviet, meaning Russian tanks.
That's exactly why the British insisted on the total destruction of the Challenger 2 if it couldn't be evacuated. The thing is, high heat changes the properties of the secret ceramic inserts. Investigating burnt wreckage is nearly impossible. The fire also disrupts the structure of the pack. Dorchester armor is a multi-layered cake made of ceramics, steel alloys, and composites. At high temperatures, the layers deform, melt, and mix together. This prevents understanding the exact sequence and geometry of the element layout. The flames also lead to changes in the structure of the materials themselves, meaning chemical analysis of burnt chunks of armor won't give answers about the material's original properties. Finally, if the tank is turned into a pile of scrap metal, proving ground tests become impossible. In other words, it's impossible to determine its vulnerable spots. Of course, it's hard to completely hide the material composition from modern spectral analysis even after an explosion and fire. But destroying the machine denies the Russians the main thing: understanding exactly how these materials work as a complex system, the metal hardening technology, bonding with other layers, and so on. So you can't just take an armored sheet, glue a ceramic plate from the Fiesta tableware company, and a Nike sneaker sole to it, and get Dorchester. However, the Russians did learn something about the Challenger 2. But not in a lab. First of all, they felt the British tank's genius fire control system on their own skin. What are we talking about? You probably noticed the large number of red buttons that catch your eye in photos and videos of the Challenger 2's workspace. No, those aren't annihilation buttons. But let the Ukrainian tanker tell you about it.
When you see a target, you just press the red button, and the turret quickly spins in the direction of the target.
In the Challenger 2, the commander's station is perfected to the absolute. A ring of periscopes around the hatch gives a 360-degree view. Below each of the 8 periscopes sits a red target designation button. If the commander spots a target in the left side periscope, he just slams the corresponding button, and the turret instantly slews exactly to that sector. What does this give you? The gunner doesn't have to hunt for the target because by the time the turret stops spinning, the target is already dead center in his sights. All that's left is to hit the laser rangefinder button and fire. Boom.
From the shot to the moment the smoke clears and the gunner can see through the sight again, it takes less than a second.
While the gunner's attention is focused on destroying the first target, the commander is working like a scanner. As soon as he spots a second target, he hits the button, and the system locks in its coordinates. Boom! And the 25-ton turret instantly slews the other way. And what about range and accuracy?
Personally, my max range is 5,300 meters. We were working on a Russian BMP.
At long ranges, this red button concept turns the Challenger 2 into a sniper with a spotter. While others waste seconds searching for a target through a narrow scope, the Challenger runs on an algorithm that minimizes the human factor, because the winner is whoever gets their crosshairs on the target first. Thanks to the panoramic sight mounted highest on the turret, the Challenger 2 can hide behind a hill, so only the commander's optic is visible. The commander spots the enemy, hits the button. The tank surges up the crest. The gun is already pointing exactly at the target. Shot, and the tank immediately rolls back. The rifled gun is another unique feature of the Challenger 2. The rifling spins the projectile like a rifle bullet. This provides incredible tight grouping at extreme ranges.
This 120mm rifled gun is really very accurate, but very delicate. You have to do maintenance ahead of time and zero the sights.
Of course, unique capabilities have a flip side. The Ukrainians also spoke about the drawbacks of the rifled gun and the Challenger 2 tank, but in another video. You can find and watch it after finishing this one. But right now, you're going to learn about the myths surrounding the Challenger 2. So the British Challenger 2 tank is often perceived as one of the weakest or most awkward Western tanks. Why? The press talks about bad handling and low speed. The rifled gun is considered a disadvantage due to lower penetration compared to smoothbore guns. The lack of HE frag ammo limits actions against enemy infantry. Let's break it down in order. In reality, the 1,200 horsepower diesel gives the Challenger 2 enough mobility to fulfill its tactical role. It's capable of moving at 60 kilometers per hour, even on bad roads, because its suspension soaks up everything. And the reverse gear has 2 speeds and a max speed of 30 kilometers per hour. For many tanks, that kind of speed is unreachable. The Challenger 2 gun fires HESH rounds. Upon impact, they flatten like a cow pie on the surface and then detonate, creating spall on the other side. That way, HESH rounds are capable of taking out any enemy tanks and equipment without penetrating, and also destroying concrete bunkers where enemy infantry is hiding. So the rumors about the Challenger 2 don't reflect reality. In fact, the British tank is much more powerful and commands respect among the fighters.
Cool ride. I fell in love with it.
We love the Challenger 2 too, and its red buttons turn it into the star of the quick and the dead. But drop a comment with your take on this tank. And let's move on to the next episode. The Russians got their hands on a Challenger 2. They didn't parade it, they dissected it. That tells you everything about how seriously they take British armor. Now, what about British guns? Because the AS-90 has a secret of its own, and it's not the armor.
Here is the brutal truth from the Zero line. We either evolve to faster, smarter systems right now, or we don't survive. There is no plan B.
Removing a muzzle brake with nothing but a log just to clean the barrel? No problem. Pulling the engine? A bit tougher, but doable. The AS-90 is repaired on the knee. There is less electronic flash here and less automation. That's exactly why for a long time it was lost in the shadow of the German Howitzer PZH 2000, the technological icon of artillery. But there's a catch. The shells the AS-90 fires sometimes make it more convincing than its German rival. Why do British munitions work differently? What exactly about the AS-90 surprised the Ukrainian crews? And why does it look like this war will be its last? That's exactly what this video is about. To start, let's see some combat work. Because right now, a 155mm AS-90 self-propelled howitzer is taking part in repelling an assault. The barrel recoils. Shells fly toward the spot where 17 Russian stormtroopers just disembarked. These are those same unique shells you'll learn about once this fight is over and the crew returns to their staging area. For now, watch them in action. Let's speed it up a bit. Go ahead, hit that like button, because where else are you going to see the result of textbook work from artillerymen? Even for the commanders watching the mission on a stack of screens, this footage is unique. The last Russian stormtrooper tries to find a place to hide. He doesn't make it in time. Job done. The vehicle returns to an underground bunker. The gates close quickly. Time to catch a breath, have a smoke, and ask the guys about their AS-90. What are their impressions?
Phew, to be honest, my arms are falling off.
Yeah, the AS-90s aren't the newest in Europe. Here, only the shell delivery is mechanized. Everything else is manual labor. But only war determines the strengths and weaknesses of a weapon. So, what does the lack of an autoloader affect besides the loader's health? First and foremost, the rate of fire. Nowadays, to survive, a crew needs to act very fast. But due to the lack of an autoloader, the AS-90s aren't that quick. Let's compare them to the gold standard. While the PZH 2000 is capable of firing up to 5 shells on different trajectories, so they hit the target simultaneously, the maximum rate of fire for the AS-90s is 3 shots in 10 seconds.
To get off 3 quick shots, you need 2 shells standing right here, ready to go, and 1 already loaded.
The subsequent rate of fire, as you can imagine, depends entirely on the physical conditioning of the crew. However, there are advantages to simplicity. For instance, you don't have to change your boots when you step into the fighting compartment, like the PZH 2000 crews do. The absence of an autoloader means less dependence on complex electronic modules and sensors that are afraid of dirt and moisture, and are hard to repair in the middle of a forest using a log or a hammer. Because servicing an autoloader requires more than just wrenches. It takes diagnostic laptops with proprietary software, and specific calibration tools. Finally, it's the lack of complex equipment that makes mastering the British howitzer easier. Is that a major plus or not? You decide. But here's what the fighters say.
We're self-taught. My whole crew, they're all self-taught.
Yes, the AS-90s are from the past, though not as ancient as the British tracked APCs, the FV-103 Spartan. That's why the British SPGs show themselves not only as more resistant to field conditions, but also more intuitive for artillerymen who have experience working with Soviet systems. However, that doesn't mean the AS-90s are that old. No, they don't need an aiming circle.
This system isn't jammed by EWs because it's autonomous and works only for this vehicle. It aims itself without additional steps. It aims, and that's it. Then we just take the shot.
Let's break it down. They've implemented lineups here, the laser inertial navigation and pointing system, which is autonomous. That's why the vehicle determines exactly where it is and where its barrel is pointed without any external landmarks. British power is impressive, but what about the accuracy? After all, Ukrainian artillery accounts for about 40% of Russian losses. How are these British SPGs performing?
The AS-90s are quite accurate, so we use them for counter-battery fire as well. At the very least, we hit the required grid square.
Here's how a counter-battery mission goes down. The SPG's commander receives target data via radio or through a digital battle management system. The data can come in while the AS-90 is moving.
Usually, we operate on the principle of a roving gun.
The British howitzer is ready to fire in less than 60 seconds from the moment of a full stop. For a few seconds, the onboard computer calculates the necessary elevation angles and azimuth, taking into account barrel wear, shell type, and weather conditions. The gunner sees the commands on the screen. In automatic mode, electric drives traverse and elevate the barrel to the specified coordinates. Boom!
We saturate them. They can't even pull up their own artillery.
But it's time to take a look at these magical British shells, thanks to which the AS-90s make their contribution to the casualty statistics.
Come on, let me show you these shells. They sit separately from the tubes with the powder bags.
So the L-15A1/A2s, the AS-90s were actually designed specifically around this shell. What's so special about them? Back in the day, the L-15 shell was developed to be the most powerful NATO standard. The thing is, it contains about 11.3 kilograms of explosives. That's a lot. But to help you understand the gulf between the Brit and other popular shells, take a look at these numbers. For comparison, the standard German DM-121 fired by the PZH-2000 or the American M107 shell and others have between 6.5 and 9 kilograms of explosives. And as you can probably guess, the more explosives, the more powerful the shockwave.
Good work, boys. Come on into the shelter.
However, stuffing more explosives into a shell is a difficult task. The British pulled off one strange trick with the L-15 munition that the Germans didn't think of. What are we talking about? Before we continue uncovering these little-known facts, please subscribe to our channel. It's your subscription that inspires us to keep researching the effectiveness of modern, and not so modern, weapons in real combat, rather than just on a proving ground. Thank you. So, moving on. The walls of the L-15 are made of high-quality steel. Yes, this steel is more expensive, but it's stronger. That's why the Brits were able to make the shell walls thinner without losing structural integrity. But the main goal of this trick is to fit in more explosives without increasing the size or the total weight of the shell.
The scale of destruction from these shells and this gun is well known to the enemy.
The result? Because of the more powerful explosion, the shrapnel velocity is higher, which increases the lethal kill zone. You've got to admit, that's a smart move. But can the AS-90s use shells from other manufacturers? This is a crucial question, because specific shells often require specific logistics. Besides, the Ukrainian army sometimes faces shortages of munitions from one manufacturer or another.
All the shells they brought yesterday, we fired off today.
Therefore, it's better to have a universal gun that's in action than a specialized one sitting idle in an underground parking lot. The AS-90s don't have downtime. They are omnivorous workhorses. Their barrels and chambers are designed for munitions from almost all Western manufacturers within the 155mm NATO standard. The British Howitzer will easily swallow a German DM-121 and lob it exactly on target. But there is a catch. A German shell doesn't turn the British Howitzer into a PZH-2000. In other words, the AS-90's firing range with a German shell will remain as it was, up to 30 kilometers. It seems people expect more from a Western gun. For comparison, the PZH-2000 is capable of hurling these shells over 40 kilometers. Why can't the AS-90s do that? As sad as it is, friend, size matters, no matter what the optimists say. The fact is, most AS-90s have a barrel length of 6 meters, which provides less range compared to the German PZH-2000, which has an 8-meter barrel. The longer the barrel, the greater the range, and vice versa. That's just how it works. As it turned out, the German SPGs, which crews nicknamed the Fickle Lady, were developed as third millennium artillery, where the main focus is on maximum high-tech, precision, and maximum range. You can easily find a video about the nuances of operating the German SPGs on our channel. But the AS-90s represent a completely different philosophy. They are simple and reliable, provided you perform timely maintenance.
The more often you grease it, the better.
And most importantly, you need spare parts to keep it in working order. But that's exactly where the main problems for the AS-90s in Ukraine begin. And it's very, very serious.
Assembling, disassembling, or tuning it, no problem. Some parts you can even turn on a lathe, but when it comes to the supply of critical components, that's a problem. Without them, keeping the SPGs in working order is impossible.
The situation is tough, and it might get worse because the AS-90s are no longer in production, and Britain has handed over all its available SPGs to Ukraine. 99 units. But imagine this. A third of those units were transferred in non-working condition. Why? They were meant to be spare parts donors to keep the main group combat ready. For a while, it worked. But everything has its limit. Over the years of the war, up to 12 AS-90s have been destroyed or damaged, and the rest have been operating under extreme conditions.
I calculated that in a year, my battery fired 10,000 rounds. The Brits say that's a huge amount. Basically, we're squeezing everything out of them.
We suspect those vehicles, as well as the donors, have been stripped down to the last bolt. So how are the Ukrainians managing this situation? It's known that Britain continues to supply critical high-wear components. Specifically, aid packages include new L31A1 barrels and other scarce spare parts. It's likely that some of the parts could be provided by Poland. The thing is, the turret of the Polish AHS Crab SPGs is a licensed copy of the AS-90's turret, so some modules might be interchangeable. Like what? First, the loading mechanisms, since the turret architecture is identical. Second, the breech and the breech block, as they're made to NATO standards. Third, the laying drives and gun elevation mechanisms. Theoretically, this allows using the Polish repair base for the British vehicles, but only partially. You're about to see why. So the engine.
Right now, we're replacing the power plant because it lost its pull.
As for the Cummins VTA903T engines, these units are still being manufactured, though exclusively for military needs. Because besides the AS-90s, Cummins engines are used by the Bradleys and the M270As fighting in Ukraine. So there are no issues with spare parts, replacement, or repair for these engines. But with everything else,
Our vehicles are from the 90s, 91 and 93 production years. They are very old. Every 10 days, something needs repair.
for example, regarding spare parts for the chassis, do you think the AS-90s were built on the base of the Challenger 2 tank? No, the Brits outsmarted themselves here, because the chassis of the AS-90 self-propelled artillery unit is an original design. For some reason, this chassis didn't become the base for a whole family of armored vehicles, as often happens with other platforms. Even the modern Polish Crab has a different base. It's a hybrid of the AS-90's turret. and a South Korean chassis from the K9 Thunder SPGs. You can watch more about this super interesting Polish SPG in a separate video. That's why the war in Ukraine is likely the last war for the AS-90 SPGs, because even the sturdy chassis of the British gun has a limited service life.
Even iron gets tired and grows old over the years.
However, this war seems to be the first where artillery isn't the primary means of destruction. In any case, the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Syrskyi, claims that the statistics are on the side of strike UAVs, which inflict up to 60% of the total losses on the enemy. Does this mean the death of artillery? Not at all, because 40% of losses from artillery is still a significant share. That's why, having given away all its AS-90 SPGs, Britain is looking for a replacement. London urgently purchased 14 Archer-wheeled systems from Sweden. This is a real sniper among artillery. The Archer is fully automated, deploys in 20 seconds, and can fire 3 shells in 15 seconds, leaving the position before they even hit the target. But the main successor to the AS-90s will be the RCH 155-wheeled SPGs. This is the world's first howitzer that can fire on the move. The RCH 155 uses the same gun as the PZH 2000, integrated into a different module. Only 2 crew members are needed here, but all of this is mounted on the chassis of a Boxer-wheeled APCs. Another advantage of a wheeled chassis is that maintenance is multiple times cheaper and simpler than tracked ones. Additionally, the mileage before a major overhaul is significantly higher for wheeled vehicles, and they consume less fuel than tracked vehicles. But you know that only war determines what's truly better. So, just in case, the Germans developed a tracked version of the RCH 155 SPGs because tracked chassis are considered more durable, though more expensive. What will be the deciding factor? Price or survivability? We will be the first to find out what wheeled chassis are worth on heavy black soil, because Ukraine became the first customer of the RCH 155s.
We need to change something. We need to switch to more advanced and faster systems. There's no other way.
Let us know in the comments if you think the RCH 155s will be a game changer, or should Britain maybe restart production of the AS-90s, but in a more high-tech modification? Or just write your impressions of the fact that artillery has stopped being the primary means of destruction. We're very interested in your opinion. And if you didn't get enough action, let's move on to the next episode. Outdated, under-maintained, running on borrowed time. And yet, the AS-90 crews kept firing. 10,000 rounds in a single year. But Britain already knows this chapter is closing. So what's next? The answer came from Scandinavia. And it's unlike anything you've seen before. That's how the IRIS-T works, the system Sweden provided the missiles for.
My stats are 99% of aerial targets hit.
These specific missiles are part of the Swedish air shield. After all, Sweden isn't just handing over some outdated gear from the warehouses to the Ukrainians, like other countries often do, but the most modern weaponry, which is often the gold standard in its class. Why? Because only war determines everything, no matter what the engineers and generals might think. Sometimes everything gets turned upside down. For example, that's how the Ukrainian experience forced the Swedish army to change its air defense doctrine. Changing doctrine is serious business. Could it be that the IRIS-T SAMs don't quite meet the challenges facing Sweden? And what about the Swedish Gripen fighters, which are integrated into the joint NATO air defense system and also carry IRIS-T missiles? You're about to find out. And along with that, you'll get an exclusive look at a brand new air defense weapon that the Swedish Army is set to receive in 2026, and why their decision to send the most cutting-edge technology to Ukraine isn't just generosity, it's strategy. But here's what makes this story truly historic. Ukraine won't just be receiving this system. Ukraine will be the first country in the world to use it in real combat, not on a training range, not in a simulation, in a live war zone, against real targets, under real pressure. That's the kind of baptism by fire no engineer can replicate in a lab. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why that matters. not just for Ukraine, but for every NATO country watching from the sidelines. Analyst reports usually contain a lot of technical nuances, but we're interested in the main thing. What's wrong with the IRIS-T-SAMs in Ukraine? So the first lesson of the war in Ukraine that the Swedish army learned is the necessity to protect not just military bases, but civilian infrastructure, cities, and energy hubs from mass drone and missile attacks. Can the IRIS-T handle these threats? Sort of. But the IRIS-T isn't a silver bullet or the main player here, because when a country gets hammered by cruise missiles escorted by 400 to 500 drones in a single go, like it happens in Ukraine, well, you can see for yourself. The thing is, there are so many drones coming in from different angles that the air defense needs to consist of hundreds of launchers. Considering the price of the IRIS-T SAMs, as well as the cost of their missiles, that's just not feasible. Just imagine, the price of an IRIS-T missile, depending on the range, starts at $450,000. That's cheaper than a Patriot missile, but way more expensive than a Russian Shahed, which costs up to $50,000. If your interceptor missile is pricier than the Shahed, you lose the war of attrition even if you shoot down every single target, meaning your defeat is just a matter of time. Besides the price, there's another problem. The IRIS-T missile works great against aircraft, helicopters, cruise missiles, targets with a strong heat signature. But the Shahed has a small engine, so a successful lock-on by the IRIS-T's infrared seeker depends on the distance and weather conditions during the attack. However, Sweden has the Gripen. Experience shows that Ukraine has done a decent job integrating its Soviet aircraft, as well as American F-16s and French Mirage 2000s, into the air defense system. But what about the Gripen? This fighter isn't a lone wolf in the sky. It was designed as part of a network. In Swedish air defense, the Gripen plays the role of a quick reaction interceptor. Its main advantage is mobility. This bird is capable of taking off from a highway. All it needs is up to 800 meters of decent road. This tactic works beautifully in Ukraine, where specific highway sections with reinforced pavement and specially prepared sites are used as jump airfields. As soon as the first Gripens show up in the Ukrainian skies, thanks to our connections, we'll get footage of them in action immediately. So hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, and you definitely won't miss it. Sweden's roads are in good order. Specific highway sections are also prepped, because this is a key element of the country's defense strategy, aimed at aviation survival in case the main air bases get destroyed. So the Gripens can disperse all over Sweden. Taking out the entire aircraft fleet with a single missile strike at 4 a.m., like Russia tried to do in Ukraine, is practically impossible. And what about the armament? How does the JAS-39 Gripen take down targets? The Swedish fighter is one of the most universal aviation platforms in the world. Thanks to its open software architecture, it's capable of carrying practically any modern Western air-to-air missiles, including expensive IRIS-T missiles. Is there an alternative? Yes, for example, the Meteor. That's the long arm. This missile will reach a fighter, an AWACS plane, a bomber, or a cruise missile at a distance of up to 200 kilometers. Can a Meteor shoot down a Shahed? Easily, but that's like shooting sparrows with golden bullets. The price of a single MBDA Meteor missile is roughly $2.5 million. Putin will be thrilled if Sweden spends that kind of money to destroy a single Shahed. Maybe there's something cheaper? The Gripen is also integrated with medium-range AM-120 AMRAAM missiles. It's cheaper than the Meteor, more mass-produced, and has been used in NATO for decades. Reliable stuff. However, it's only cheaper for the USA. But to their Swedish partners, the states push it at a price of $2.4 million. That's not a joke. That's business. So what's a Gripen pilot supposed to do when he spots a Shahed? That leaves the good old Mauser BK-27. It's a 27mm revolver-type aircraft cannon. It fires up to 1,700 rounds per minute. Crazy little thing. But only Ukrainian pilots know how to shoot down Shaheds with guns. It's a very risky mission because after hitting the UAV, a cloud of debris forms that can damage the aircraft. Ukraine has already suffered losses because of this. That's exactly why a territorial air defense system appeared in the Swedish army. This is Sweden's new doctrine. We're talking about mobile fire groups for fighting drones, similar to the Ukrainian ones. Here's how it works.
I'm a gunner for the RBS-70 complex. The tactic is as follows. We're in position and waiting for a target. When it appears, we shoot it down.
The RBS-70 system works on the laser beam riding principle, which fundamentally distinguishes it from the Stinger. The maximum range is up to 9,000 meters, and the altitude is up to 5,000 meters. Ideal parameters against strike UAVs like the Shahed. The missile has a laser radiation receiver in the tail section, so as long as the operator keeps the target in the crosshairs, the missile stays on the laser path right until impact. It's very hard to confuse it. However, there's a problem. Although the price of a single missile for the RBS-70 is much cheaper than other missiles, it's still more expensive than a Shahed, $150,000. That's why the Swedish Army ordered a more suitable weapon against Shaheds, the Tridon Mark II. This specific system is supposed to become the main player against strike UAVs. The first operator of this Swedish system will be the Ukrainian Army. And this is another innovation of the Swedish General Staff. Until a weapon undergoes a baptism by fire in war, it isn't considered reliable. The first combat use of the Tridon Mark II will take place in the coming weeks, because according to some sources, these systems have already arrived in Ukraine. Here's what we managed to find out about this system. At first glance, the Tridon Mark II is just a cannon on a truck. But actually, things are more complicated. Firepower is provided by the Bofors L-70 cannon. Yeah, the very same one that's installed on the CV-90 IFVs. The Bofors L-70, old school. 40 millimeters of argument, 300 rounds per minute. But even an old gun can be given a cool edge if you load it with these awesome programmable munitions. A well-known mechanism works here. Right before the shot, the shell passes through an induction programmer, a special ring on the barrel where the shell gets the command to detonate a certain amount of time after firing. But that's not all. Inside every single one of those shells, there's a surprise. After it detonates at a distance of roughly 1 meter from the target, a cloud of tungsten balls forms. The kill zone increases tens of times over, so a short burst of 2 to 4 rounds is enough to destroy a drone. And what about accuracy? Here, the radar and fire control system are responsible for that. The radar sees the target from kilometers away. The computer calculates the target's speed, its trajectory, and the flight time of the shell to the point where it needs to detonate to create a cloud of shrapnel. Boom, and the job is done. Moreover, it's done in an economically rational way because each shell costs up to $5,000. At that price, a war of attrition isn't profitable for Russia. Why Russia specifically? Previously, Sweden conducted military exercises using fictional scenarios against fictional countries, like Bohdana or something similar. But after the Russian aggression against Ukraine, the situation changed. Now the Swedish armed forces openly discuss Russia and its capabilities, not some made-up country. And although Sweden and Russia don't share a land border, however, there is a maritime border established between the countries in the Baltic Sea. Flying over the sea allows drones to go literally a few meters above the water, which makes detecting them with coastal radars difficult due to clutter from the waves. That's why Sweden is learning to meet them on land. The Tridon Mark II isn't just an AA gun from the past, but a modern and relatively cheap tool for countering mass attacks by Russian UAVs. So, the Ukrainian war has essentially become a testing ground for Sweden. Every missile or shell provided, every tank or IFV, is an investment in the power of the Swedish Army. We hope you found this interesting. And let's move on to the next episode. Sweden didn't just send weapons to Ukraine. They sent their best and watched what happened. What came back wasn't just battlefield data. It was a completely new doctrine. And while the high-tech systems grab headlines, two crews in the mud are making history with something far older and far more honest. You're watching one of the most high-tech wars in history. And somehow, weapons from the 1940s are still shaping the battlefield. In Ukraine, artillery crews are dragging an American M114 Howitzer out of storage. a gun older than most of the soldiers firing it, and using it on the front line today. By every modern standard, this weapon should be obsolete. But in the mud, cold, and constant drone surveillance of Donbas, it's surviving where newer systems are getting hunted and destroyed. At the same time, Ukraine has done something that seems completely backwards. They took their most advanced artillery system, the Bohdana, and stripped it down into a towed gun. In this video, we go to the zero line to compare the American relic and the Ukrainian prototype, and explain why, in this war, simplicity is keeping crews alive.
Gun. Fire.
So when the fog rolls in, that's when the action kicks off?
Yeah, and the thicker it gets, the crazier it becomes. Frosty days are coming now, and honestly, there's almost nothing we can do. Over the last week, we lost 5 civilian vehicles. Thank God all the guys are alive. They're working both at long range, about 20 kilometers, roughly 12.4 miles, from the front line. And when it comes to moving in, driving up to the position, there are waiters sitting at every intersection. Pretty much every intersection is mined.
Today, Army TV is working with the 141st Separate Mechanized Brigade. We're heading out to the guys fighting with the American M114 Howitzer. By the way, the crew has the exact model that saw combat back in Vietnam. So, we've arrived at the firing positions of the 41st Separate Mechanized Brigade. The guys warned us, when we get out of the vehicle, watch every step. The Russians are heavily mining the area now, with PTM anti-tank mines and petal mines.
The M114 gun, in my opinion, is an underrated artillery firepower system. This weapon actually dates back to the 1940s. This specific gun took part in combat operations in Vietnam. I think it helped the Americans back then. Now it'll help us a bit too. What you see in front of you is a real treasure, capable of hitting the enemy with 155mm rounds at a distance of almost 15 kilometers, around 9.3 miles. That's its maximum range, unfortunately. And that's really its only drawback. Since it arrived here, it has already fired around 300 rounds. So far, there haven't been any issues with it. Towed artillery, in my opinion, has a big advantage over self-propelled guns. Yes, it's not as mobile, but especially in a positional war, if the crew can properly and quickly prepare firing positions, we can conduct displacements. This gun has much greater survivability compared to SPGs. Causing it any critical damage is extremely difficult, but that's also thanks to what you see. Look at the shelter we're in, how many camouflage nets we use to stay alive. People say infantry digs a lot. In my opinion, artillery digs twice as much now, just to survive. Move it, move it. The wide wheels allow it to be transported normally. It doesn't act like a plow behind the prime mover. And I'd say it's pretty well adapted to harsh weather conditions. It doesn't ice up. Once again, the sighting equipment is very well made. I used to work on the FH-70, and there you had problems. Water leaks in, frost hits, and the sights just fail. Here, everything is much simpler, rougher, almost crude. In today's conditions, that's a huge plus. There aren't many guns like this left. You can see the barrel. There's no muzzle brake on it. That's an advantage for us because the propellant gases don't blow out sideways and don't ruin our camouflage. That's a massive difference compared to Soviet systems, where everything blasts out to the sides. Branches burn, vegetation ignites, and so on. Here, that problem doesn't exist. The powder flash is far less visible, much less fire when firing. And even by muzzle flash alone, it's extremely hard to detect this gun's position.
Rotation of your gun crews. How many guys are sitting on position? How many are resting? And has this become more difficult now compared to 2022?
Look, it's become a lot harder, directly harder for us. Before it used to be 6 days working, 3 days resting, then 8 on, 4 off. Now it's 10 on, 5 off. And it happens that the guys can spend 12, even 14 days on the positions. It all depends on the weather. We might plan to move after 10 days, but that road can easily turn into a one-way trip. Before any logistics movement, we carefully break down the route we're going to take. We know the dangerous spots along the way, places where something nasty is most likely waiting for us. Sometimes someone goes on foot first, walking for kilometers, checking whether there are waiters and where they might be sitting. Or sometimes you just cross yourself, put your faith in God, and drive. Gun. Fire.
Support the channel with a like and subscribe.
Gun.
Fire.
Greetings to all free people. Today is a premiere. The 2P22 Bohdana BG gun, or simply put, the towed Bohdana gun. Before we introduce you to its combat crew, we'll show you how it works in combat and explain all its features. A short story about how this gun came to be. At the moment when Ukraine began mass-producing the self-propelled versions of the Bohdana, it turned out that more guns themselves, the barrels, breeches, all the core components, were produced than there were chassis available in Ukraine to mount them on. So the question came up, why not make a towed version of the Bohdana? First, the towed version is much cheaper than the self-propelled one. Second, the gun itself already exists. You only need to find a carriage for the towed configuration. That's where the Soviet Hyacinth B, Hyacinth B howitzers came in. Their carriages adapted perfectly to the Bohdana B gun. And that's how Ukraine got its own towed howitzer, Bohdana B, also known as 2P22 Bohdana BG. According to available information, Ukraine has already developed its own authentic carriage that this towed gun will be mounted on. And I think very soon, we'll be able to show you what a purely Ukrainian gun looks like. For now, friends, we introduce you to this very 2P22 Bohdana BG, which is operating with the 47th Separate Artillery Brigade.
На тих самих 585.
Gun.
Fire. The gun is pretty good, accurate. There are some quirks, sure, but it's pleasant to work with. Lately, we've mostly been working against enemy infantry.
What distance?
Around 13 kilometers, roughly 8 miles.
And what's the maximum range?
Maximum is about 40 kilometers, around 25 miles, using rocket-assisted projectiles.
You know what I noticed? Compared to the guns we filmed before, like the Hyacinth B, this one operates much quieter.
Yes, it's significantly quieter. The muzzle and barrel compensator is different, built differently. That's why it sounds softer.
Have you worked with any other guns?
Before this, we had the Hyacinth. In terms of accuracy, the Bohdana is better.
Weight?
Weight is 9.7 tons, that's roughly 21,400 pounds.
Length?
13.6 meters, about 44.6 feet.
That's with these stabilizer legs folded in, right? Roughly speaking, from the barrel to the very ends?
At one point we thought about giving her a name, but we never came up with one. Still, her time will come, and she'll prove herself in one way or another.
Another important detail, since artillery today mostly hides in shelters like this, you can imagine how much effort it takes to dig a full revetment, or a massive shelter for a self-propelled Bohdana SPG, or to dig a position for a towed Bohdana, which is much smaller than the self-propelled version. A small detail, but a critical one. Let's imagine this. You walk into a store, and that store has every artillery system you can possibly imagine. What would you choose?
I'd probably choose the Bohdana. Why? Because of its simplicity of use and its accuracy, its precision in combat work.
Self-propelled or towed?
The towed gun.
You don't want the self-propelled version?
I don't want an SPG. It's bulky, very hard to camouflage. And I feel sorry for my people. It's extremely hard work with those systems. There's still a lot of work around this gun too, but it's an order of magnitude smaller. Fire!
How long have you been working together as this crew?
From the very beginning.
What, you're not tired of each other yet?
There are different moments.
Maybe you'd like to pass along some wishes.
To the designers?
To the designers, among others.
Install something here, like on the Howitzer.
You mean an automatic rammer?
Yes, like on the Howitzer. Better the way it's done on the Howitzer. It's more reliable.
Different situations happen. It would also be good if they thought through a way to tow it out of a trench using the barrel. Hook onto the barrel and pull it out of the position, or to rotate it 180 degrees. Sometimes it's really hard to drive in, and in some situations that kind of solution would be optimal.
Well, and a toilet. War is war, but lunch is on schedule.
Yes, 100%. That's sacred. Lunch is sacred. A Vietnam-era howitzer. A gun born from spare parts. No screens, no automation, just hands, muscle, and will. But while these crews were digging in and firing round after round, someone else was quietly changing the rules entirely. No soldier, no risk, no mercy. Meet the machine that held a front line for 6 weeks and took prisoners without firing a single shot.
The Iron Infantryman. How did a robot with Browning machine gun take Russians prisoner?
I never would have thought you could fight with something like this.
And for a whole month and a half, it led the invaders by the nose. This is exactly what the enemy heard and felt the moment they got close to the line held by this drone. Exclusive details from the battlefield.
I was the one sitting behind the joystick controlling this drone.
In just a moment, don't miss it. A few monitors and gaming joysticks in hand. At first glance, everything looks just like a computer gaming zone.
Actually, there are a lot of similarities with computer games.
But the gamers here are fighters, and for them, everything happening is by no means imaginary, but real combat prep.
Here, it's all done with these regular controllers from a PlayStation 5. I never would have thought you could do this. Fight.
The fighter from the 3rd Assault Brigade with the call sign Cyber loved playing computer games in civilian life too. But now, the joystick has become his weapon. Cyber is a former infantryman. Now he's responsible for the skills of the Iron Infantryman, a robot drone that doesn't let the enemy storm Ukrainian positions. And in real time, it's actually changing the very logic of war. Look closely at this footage. Hiding in the tree line, the Iron fighter opens fire. It shoots short bursts in response to the enemy. Footage shot in the Kharkiv sector, and it's already gone down in history. See that black silhouette in the field? It's not a tank or an IFV, but its tasks are the same. So meet the... This is that black silhouette from the video. Now we can examine it in detail. The tracks move pretty fast and literally dig into the snow, maneuvering and turning under the quiet sound of the engine. But what abilities does this robot drone have? Facts of the Week has a unique opportunity to see this war machine in action. Over 200 kilograms, 440 pounds of weight, that's exactly how much this drone can carry on itself. The platform was initially developed as a logistics one, but in the result, it turned into a combat asset. So it's a versatile fighter, knows how to carry cargo and how to fight. And now to the most interesting part, firepower. A heavy caliber American Browning machine gun sits comfortably on top of this drone, ready at any moment to show what it's capable of. And this is what helped the fighters of the 3rd Assault Brigade pull off an incredible operation, the details of which we will reveal right now. This is exactly what the enemy heard and felt the moment they got close to the line held by this drone. The fighter with the call sign, Frank, is the one controlling this ground robotic complex.
I was the one sitting behind the joystick controlling this drone, but in reality, a very large number of my brothers in arms and adjacent units were involved in all this work.
Without an operator, this drone is just a pile of scrap metal. But in the right hands, it's a weapon capable of changing the course of battle.
This is what secures manpower. Our manpower, the operator of these machines. He is in relative safety. We are at a comfortable distance from the line of contact. And we can fully focus on our work.
At first, the robot brought weapons and ammo to the battlefield. Later, they started thinking, maybe it can fight too.
We prepared for the combat use of these modules for a very long time. At that moment, it was a very difficult sector on which the enemy was constantly conducting assault actions.
And that's why the infantry needed reinforcements. But the robot drone didn't just drive onto the position for a day. Instead of real fighters, an Iron One held the line for a month and a half, and actually fooled the Russians because they didn't even think about something like this. But the main thing isn't even that.
We needed to squeeze the maximum out of it and cover the sector as much as possible. These were two flanks that we needed to hold, both the left and the right.
The drone was working almost 180 degrees. As soon as its camera detected the slightest movement, at that time, the invaders were on both sides, trying with all their might to seize another few feet of Ukrainian land. But the robot stood in their way.
The enemy realized it was better not to poke their noses into this sector after we repelled a few waves. There were fewer assault attempts. We did our job. And for our guys who were at the forward positions, life became much easier.
But this operation had its own difficulties. One of the toughest moments, replenishing the drone's ammo loadout, still required the physical involvement of the fighters.
And you have to set everything up right away so that once it rolls out to the firing line, it shoots. We won't reveal all the secrets in detail. Periodically, we had to come back, get all this done, and return back to the military line.
The drone continued to carry out its task, and the Russians couldn't do a thing about it.
Already after all this, when we were reviewing the video, the recordings, breaking down the explosions, some positive moments, negative ones, we felt a certain satisfaction from a job well done. Covering grenade.
And this is video from a scout's body cam, shot a few months ago. Full contact. Ukrainian fighters are starting the clearing of enemy positions. And it doesn't take long. 7 occupiers unexpectedly and quickly decide to surrender. Such operations are always risky, because the lives of Ukrainian fighters are on the line. And that is why, more and more often, The enemy is taken prisoner using other methods, with the help of, once again, robots. The Russians lay down their arms and obediently follow Ukrainian infantrymen. And here's what led up to this: a small robot. It's like the younger brother of the one that held the position for Ukrainian fighters, and this little guy proved himself 100%.
This was our engineering squad, plus they have special drones that drive out with a load of mines and build barriers there.
The drone successfully mined the enemy position.
In the tree line, there was an enemy position and we couldn't take it. An assault group went there, which, roughly speaking, suffered a defeat. And then they turned to us to handle it.
One drone mined the dugout, the other met the disoriented enemy, but without the bread and salt.
When the second drone was already approaching, they realized that was it. It would be the end for them there. When the UAV flew up, we saw this white sign. When we focused the camera, we read all this. It said, "We want to surrender."
This remote-controlled little machine not only made the Russians tremble with horror, but also wrote a new page in the history of this war, where robots save the lives of Ukrainian defenders and fight just as well.
We are all doing the same thing. We are all busy fighting against the enemy.
Ground robot drones are increasingly becoming helpers to Ukrainian defenders. They are already helping full scale with logistics where it is extremely dangerous, with evacuating the wounded, and as we can see, with unique special operations.
Everything that we did, everything up to this day, all our operations, they are all for the first time. This is all new.
And this is obviously just the beginning. We will hear a lot more about such iron infantrymen.
And that's exactly where we leave you. Because this compilation wasn't just videos. It was a map of where warfare is going. From a gun that fought in Vietnam to a joystick operator saving lives from a gaming chair. You watched all of it. That means you're exactly who we're building this for. Tell us what untold story from this war you're still waiting for someone to tell properly. Which weapon, which unit, which moment that got buried in the noise. We read every single one. And the next big thing we make, you'll know you were part of why it exists. Subscribe, stay safe, and support Ukraine.